When a billionaire CEO discovered his quietest employee had saved his empire, then was destroyed for it, he faced an impossible choice: protect his power or expose the truth that could shatter everything he'd built. What happened in those 5 hours between midnight and dawn would force Adrian Vale to choose between the company he created and the woman everyone ignored. Before this night ends, careers will burn, reputations will collapse, and one man will learn that sometimes the cost of doing what's right is losing everything you thought mattered. If you want to see how this story unfolds, stay until the end, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The city never truly slept. From the 47th floor of the Vale Industries Tower, Adrian Vale could see the pulse of it, headlights streaming through arteries of asphalt, windows glowing like scattered stars, the distant wail of sirens painting urgency across the midnight canvas. He stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his corner office, one hand loosely holding a tumbler of bourbon he hadn't touched in 20 minutes, the other buried deep in his pocket. His tie hung loose around his unbuttoned collar. His sleeves were rolled to his elbows. His dark hair, usually immaculate, fell across his forehead in a way that would have horrified his stylist. But Adrian wasn't thinking about appearances. He was thinking about failure. The Meridian deal, 18 months of negotiations, hundreds of millions in projected revenue, partnerships that would reshape 3 industries, was supposed to close tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. sharp. Contract signed, champagne popped, press releases distributed. Instead, it was imploding. The data was corrupted. Not just corrupted, devastated. Financial projections, legal documentation, technical specifications, all of it compromised by what the IT department was calling catastrophic system failure. Translation: someone had fucked up so badly that the entire foundation of the deal had turned to digital quicksand. His phone buzzed against the glass desktop. Adrian didn't move to check it. He'd already fielded 17 calls in the last 2 hours. His CFO, panicking. His legal team, scrambling. The Meridian representatives, increasingly cold and suspicious. His head of IT making promises he clearly couldn't keep. "We'll have it fixed by morning, Mr. Vale. I guarantee it." Adrian didn't believe in guarantees anymore. Not after his wife had promised she'd fight the cancer, promised she'd see their daughter grow up, promised that everything would be okay. Promises were just pretty words people used to fill the silence before reality arrived. The phone buzzed again. This time, something made him look. The message wasn't from any of the expected numbers. It was from an internal extension he didn't immediately recognize. The preview showed only a handful of words. "Mr. Vale, I think I can fix this, please." He frowned, unlocking his phone to read the full message. "Mr. Vale, I think I can fix this, please. I know it's late, and I know I'm overstepping, but I've been reviewing the corrupted files, and I believe I can recover most of the data. I found a pattern in the corruption. It's not random. If I'm right, I can rebuild the core documents by morning. I just need access to the backup servers and the original encryption keys. I'm in the building now. 4th floor, data analytics. Please respond if you're still there. Lena Hart." Adrian stared at the name for a long moment. Lena Hart. He knew the name, vaguely. She worked in data analytics, buried somewhere in the middle tiers of the department. He'd probably passed her in hallways, maybe nodded at her during one of the all-hands meetings, where he forced himself to make eye contact with employees whose names he'd never remember. The quiet one, someone had called her once. Karen? Kevin? One of the department heads during a performance review discussion he'd only half listened to. She's competent, detail-oriented, doesn't make waves. Didn't make waves. In Adrian's world, that was code for forgettable. But right now, forgettable was reaching out with something that sounded dangerously close to hope. He checked the time. 11:47 p.m. Then he texted back. 4th floor. I'm on my way. The elevator descent felt longer than it should have. Adrian watched the numbers tick down, 47, 46, 45, and tried to remember the last time he'd personally handled a technical crisis. Years ago, probably. Back when Vale Industries was small enough that he knew every employee's name, when he still wrote code himself. When the thrill of building something mattered more than the empire he was building. Somewhere along the way, he'd become the kind of CEO who delegated emergencies. And yet here he was, riding an elevator at midnight to meet an analyst whose face he couldn't quite picture. The fourth floor was dark except for the emergency lighting and the pale glow spilling from one of the open office areas. Adrian followed it, his footsteps quiet on the polished floor, until he found her. Lena Hart sat at a workstation surrounded by 3 monitors, her fingers moving rapidly across a keyboard. She wore dark jeans and a simple gray sweater, not the business casual most employees defaulted to, but something softer, more worn. Her dark hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and she had the kind of face that could disappear in a crowd, pretty in an understated way, with sharp eyes that suggested she saw more than she said. She didn't notice him immediately. Adrian cleared his throat softly. Lena's hands froze. She turned, and for a moment her eyes went wide, genuine surprise, maybe even alarm, before she stood quickly, nearly knocking over a coffee mug that looked like it had been refilled too many times tonight. "Mr. Vale, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you come in. You said you could fix this." Adrian kept his voice even, professional. "Explain." Lena blinked, then nodded, turning back to her monitors. "The corruption isn't random. Everyone's been treating it like a system failure, like the servers crashed and burned everything they touched. But when I started mapping the damaged files, I found a pattern." She pulled up a visualization, a network of nodes and connections that meant nothing to Adrian at first glance. "The corruption follows a specific pathway through our database architecture. It hit the Meridian files hardest, but it also touched 3 other major projects in very precise ways. Someone didn't just break the system, they targeted it." Adrian felt something cold settle in his chest. "You're saying this was deliberate?" "I'm saying it's possible." Lena's voice was quiet, but certain. "And if I'm right about the pattern, I can reverse engineer the corruption. The data isn't gone, it's scrambled, like someone took a completed puzzle and scattered the pieces. If I can figure out the logic they used to scatter them, I can put them back together." "How long?" "If you give me full access to the backup servers and the encryption keys your IT department has been refusing to hand over." Lena met his eyes. 5 hours. Maybe 6. "It refused to give you access." "They said I didn't have clearance." A flicker of something crossed her face. Frustration, maybe, or resignation. "They said they'd handle it themselves." Adrian pulled out his phone and made a call. It rang 4 times before his head of IT answered, voice rough with sleep. "Vale. Brandon, I need you to grant emergency access to the backup servers for Lena Hart and data analytics. Full clearance. Everything." A pause. "Sir, with all due respect, we have a team working on Your team has had 4 hours and made 0 progress. Ms. Hart has a theory. I want her to test it. Make it happen in the next 10 minutes, or I'll have someone else do it." He hung up before Brandon could respond. Lena was staring at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "You didn't have to. Can you actually fix this? Or are you wasting my time?" The bluntness seemed to steady her. "I can fix it." "Then fix it." Adrian pulled a chair from a nearby desk and sat down. "I'll stay." "You don't need to Ms. Hart." He looked at her directly. "If you're wrong, I need to know immediately so I can start damage control. If you're right, I need to see exactly what you're doing so I can explain it to a room full of very angry people tomorrow morning. Either way, I'm staying." Lena studied him for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Okay?" Her phone chimed, a message from IT. "Access granted." "Okay," she said again, quieter this time, and turned back to her screens. And the real work began. Adrian had forgotten what it felt like to watch someone truly brilliant at work. Lena moved through the data like a surgeon through living tissue, careful, precise, but with an underlying confidence that suggested deep understanding. She barely spoke except to mutter half-thoughts to herself, explanations of logic Adrian only partially followed. If the corruption used a recursive algorithm, then the timestamp variance should show there. There it is. Need to isolate the root node before I can start reconstruction, or the whole thing cascades again. They didn't encrypt the corruption path itself. That's sloppy. That's really sloppy. Why would anyone? Around 1:30 a.m., Adrian got up to find coffee. The break room on the 4th floor was empty and dark, but the machine still worked. He made 2 cups, black for himself, then hesitated. He didn't know how Lena took her coffee. Didn't know anything about her, really. He brought both cups back black and set one beside her keyboard. "Thank you," she said without looking up. "How do you take it?" "However it comes." A small, distracted smile. "Beggars and choosers and all that?" Adrian watched her work in silence for another 20 minutes before he asked, "Why are you here this late?" Lena's hands paused for just a fraction of a second. "I was reviewing the quarterly analysis reports. I saw the corruption notice come through around 10. Everyone else had already left. I thought I'd take a look, and found a pattern no one else saw. I got lucky." "That's not luck." Adrian leaned back in his chair. "You saw something because you were looking when no one else was. That's skill." Lena didn't respond to that. She pulled up another screen, cross-referenced something, made a small sound of satisfaction. "First layer is reconstructed, 7 more to go." You want to tell me why IT refused to give you access?" Her shoulders tensed slightly. "Office politics. I'm not exactly popular with the department heads." "Why not?" "Because I point out problems before they become disasters." She said it matter-of-factly, without bitterness. "And people don't like being told they're wrong before they have a chance to fail publicly." Adrian felt a flicker of recognition. He'd known people like that. Hell, he'd been that person once, back before he learned to package criticism in diplomatic language and strategic silence. "You reported the security vulnerabilities in our server architecture last year," he said suddenly, the memory surfacing. "The ones IT said were negligible risks." Lena looked at him with surprise. "You remember that?" "I remember my CFO telling me we'd dodged a potential nightmare because someone caught a vulnerability before it was exploited. I didn't realize that someone was you. It wasn't a big deal. Apparently it was big enough that IT still hasn't forgiven you." Lena's smile was wry, tired. "I have a talent for making people uncomfortable by being right at inconvenient times." Sounds exhausting. "It is." She went back to work, and Adrian found himself studying her more carefully, not with the detached assessment he usually applied to employees, but with genuine curiosity. She had the kind of presence people overlooked, not because she was unremarkable, but because she'd learned to be invisible. It was in the way she held herself, the way she dressed, the way she kept her voice low and her opinions carefully neutral. This was someone who had been punished for standing out, and yet here she was, at midnight, volunteering to save a company that probably didn't appreciate her. "Why did you reach out to me?" Adrian asked. "You could have kept working quietly, taken credit in the morning." Lena was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was softer. "Because I knew that if I fixed it without authorization, they'd find a way to make it a problem. But if I asked you first, there'd be a record, a trail, something that showed I wasn't just acting on my own." "You were covering yourself." "I was being smart." She glanced at him. "There's a difference between being brave and being stupid, Mr. Vale. I learned that a long time ago." Adrian wanted to ask what had taught her that lesson, but Lena had already turned back to her screens, and the moment for that kind of honesty had passed. By 3:15 a.m., they'd fallen into a rhythm. Lena would work in focused bursts, explaining her logic when Adrian asked questions, accepting his suggestions when they made sense. He'd forgotten how much he enjoyed this. The collaborative problem-solving, the immediate feedback loop, the satisfaction of watching something broken become whole. They'd moved past the professional distance. Not friends, exactly, but something closer than strangers. "Tell me something," Adrian said during a lull while Lena ran a verification protocol. "If you're this good, why are you still in data analytics? You should be running the department." Lena laughed, a quiet, slightly bitter sound. "I've been promoted 3 times and demoted twice. Turns out being good at the work and being good at the politics are very different skills." "What happened?" "The first time? I caught my supervisor falsifying performance metrics, reported it through proper channels. He got transferred. I got promoted into his position. His friends made sure I didn't last 6 months." She said it without emotion, like reciting historical facts. "The second time, I pushed back on a vendor contract I knew was going to fail. I was right. The project collapsed. But I'd embarrassed the VP who'd approved it, so back down I went. And you stayed. I have bills, Mr. Vale, and honestly, She met his eyes. I like the work. I'm good at it. I don't need to be in charge to find meaning in what I do. Adrian thought about his own climb to the top, the compromises he'd made, the people he'd stepped over or around, the way power had gradually replaced purpose. That's admirable, he said quietly. It's realistic. Lena turned back to her screen. Admirable is what you call it when you can afford principles. Realistic is what you do when you can't. The verification protocol finished. Lena made a small sound of triumph. Layer 5 complete. This is actually working. You sound surprised. I had about 60% confidence when I sent you that message. A genuine smile now, bright and unguarded. I'm very good at sounding certain when I'm terrified. Adrian found himself smiling back. Another valuable skill. The most valuable, in my experience. They worked through Layer 6 together, Adrian reading off data strings while Lena cross-referenced them against her reconstruction algorithm. It was tedious work, the kind that would have driven him crazy if he'd been alone, but with Lena it felt almost meditative. Around 4 a.m., she ordered pizza from a 24-hour place that delivered to the business district. They ate it at her workstation, grease-stained napkins scattered among the keyboards, talking about everything except work. Adrian learned that Lena had grown up in the Midwest, studied computer science and philosophy, loved mystery novels, and hated romantic comedies. She learned that Adrian had a 6-year-old daughter named Sophie, who was currently obsessed with dinosaurs and refused to wear anything that wasn't purple. Your wife must love that, Lena said, then immediately froze when she saw Adrian's face. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have assumed. She passed away, Adrian said quietly. 2 years ago, cancer. I'm so sorry. Don't be. You didn't know. He took a breath. Sophie doesn't remember much about her anymore. Sometimes that feels like mercy. Sometimes it feels like losing her twice. Lena didn't offer platitudes. She just nodded, understanding in her silence, and something about that felt more comforting than any words could have been. They finished the pizza, got back to work. Layer 7. At 4:23 a.m., Lena pressed enter on the final command sequence. They both watched the progress bar crawl across the screen, 70%, 80%, 90%. Adrian realized he was holding his breath. 100%. A confirmation message appeared. Reconstruction complete. File integrity, 98.7%. Lena leaned back in her chair, exhaling slowly. We did it. You did it? Adrian corrected. I just watched. You stayed. Lena looked at him, and there was something vulnerable in her expression. Gratitude, maybe, or simple human exhaustion. You didn't have to stay. Yes, I did. For a moment, they just looked at each other. The office was silent except for the hum of computers and the distant sound of early morning traffic beginning to build. Adrian stood. I need you to send me a full report of what you did tonight. Technical breakdown, timeline, everything. I'll need it for the morning meeting. Of course. Lena was already pulling up a template. I can have it to you by 7. Make it 6:30. And Lena? She looked up. Thank you. You saved not just the deal. You saved the company. Lena smiled, small, tired, genuine. Just doing my job, Mr. Vale. Call me Adrian. Surprise flickered across her face, then, just doing my job, Adrian. He left her there, still working, the quiet hero of a crisis most people would never know happened. In the elevator back to his office, Adrian felt something he hadn't experienced in months. Optimism. Not just about the Meridian deal, but about the company itself. If there were people like Lena hidden in the organization, brilliant, dedicated, overlooked, then maybe Vale Industries was stronger than he'd thought. Maybe there was still something worth building here. He walked into his office, sat at his desk, and began composing the email that would save the Meridian deal. He copied Lena on it, made sure her contribution was explicitly credited, detailed exactly what she'd accomplished. It was the least he could do. By 6 a.m., the responses started coming in. Relief from the legal team, cautious optimism from Meridian's representatives, a terse acknowledgement from his head of IT. At 6:30, Lena's report arrived. Meticulous, clear, professionally devastating in its implicit criticism of the systems that had failed. Adrian forwarded it to his entire executive team with a single line. This is what competence looks like. By 7 a.m., he was standing in his bathroom, showering away the exhaustion of an all-nighter, preparing for the meeting that would determine whether the last 5 hours had been enough. By 8 a.m., he was in a fresh suit, third cup of coffee in hand, reviewing talking points. By 8:45, he was in the executive conference room, watching his team file in with expressions ranging from exhausted to terrified. At 9 a.m., the Meridian representatives joined via video conference. "Gentlemen," Adrian began, "I understand there were concerns about data integrity. I want to assure you that those concerns have been addressed, completely." He walked them through it. The corruption, the recovery, the 98.7% file integrity. He didn't mention that it had taken one analyst working through the night. Not yet. That revelation would come later, strategically. The meeting lasted 90 minutes. At 10:30, the contracts were signed. At 11, champagne was opened. At 11:15, Adrian's phone buzzed with a message from his CFO. "However you pulled this off, I don't want to know. But thank you." Adrian smiled and texted back, "Thank Lena Hart in data analytics. She's the one who saved us." He expected gratitude to flow downward. He had no idea he'd just signed Lena's death warrant. Lena left the office at 5:47 a.m., exhausted but satisfied. She'd saved the company. She'd done the right thing. She'd worked beside the CEO himself and proven that she belonged in that room, that she deserved to be seen. She took the subway home, fell into bed still wearing her jeans, and slept the sleep of the righteously tired. When she woke at 2 p.m., she had 17 missed calls and an email summoning her to HR at 9 a.m. the following morning. The subject line: urgent, protocol violation investigation. Lena stared at her phone, heart sinking as understanding settled over her like ice water. She'd been right about one thing. Being smart and being brave were very different. She should have chosen smarter. She should have stayed invisible. Because in the 5 hours she'd spent saving Vail Industries, she'd made herself visible to people who had spent years perfecting the art of making problems disappear. And Lena Hart, it seemed, had just become a problem. The HR office on the 12th floor had always reminded Lena of a dentist's waiting room. Sterile and comfortable, designed to make you feel small before anything actually happened. She sat in one of the gray chairs outside Patricia Hendricks' office at 8:47 a.m., hands folded in her lap, watching the second hand tick around the wall clock with methodical cruelty. She'd worn her most professional outfit, navy blazer, white blouse, black slacks, armor disguised as business casual. Her hair was pulled back in a tight bun, her minimal makeup carefully applied to hide the exhaustion still clinging to her features. She looked like someone who had everything under control. She felt like someone drowning in slow motion. The email had been vague: protocol violation investigation, immediate response required, but Lena had learned to read the subtext of corporate language. Investigation meant they'd already decided she was guilty. Immediate meant they wanted her gone before she could build a defense. What she couldn't figure out was why. She'd saved the Meridian deal. Adrian himself had thanked her, had promised her contribution would be recognized. She'd followed his direct orders, had full authorization from the CEO. There was documentation, timestamps, email trails proving everything she'd done was sanctioned. Unless. The door to Patricia's office opened. Patricia Hendricks, 40-something, perpetually severe, with the kind of face that looked like it had forgotten how to smile sometime in the late 90s, gestured Lena inside without preamble. "Ms. Hart, please sit." Lena entered the office and immediately understood that this wasn't just HR. Brandon Reeves sat in one of the chairs facing Patricia's desk. Brandon, the head of IT who'd refused her access to the servers until Adrian had personally intervened. He looked freshly showered, professionally concerned, and utterly prepared. Beside him sat Marcus Chen, Lena's direct supervisor in data analytics. Marcus, who'd built his career on other people's work and his own strategic silence. He wouldn't meet her eyes. Patricia closed the door and moved behind her desk with the slow deliberation of someone savoring control. "Ms. Hart, thank you for coming in on such short notice. I'm sure you're aware why you're here." The email mentioned a protocol violation. Lena kept her voice steady, but it didn't specify what I'm supposed to have violated. "Let's not play games." Brandon leaned forward, his expression somewhere between disappointed and offended. You accessed restricted servers without proper authorization. You manipulated sensitive data related to the Meridian acquisition. You bypassed multiple security protocols and conducted unsupervised system modifications that could have resulted in catastrophic data loss. Lena stared at him. I had direct authorization from Mr. Vale. A text message at midnight is not proper authorization, Patricia said smoothly, especially when that authorization contradicts established IT security protocols and chain-of-command procedures. The proper authorization, Brandon continued, would have been a formal written request submitted through your supervisor, reviewed by the IT security team, and approved through official channels. What you did was circumvent every safeguard we have in place to protect company data. The company data was already compromised. Lena heard her voice rise and forced it back down. The Meridian deal was collapsing. Mr. Vale made an executive decision to grant me emergency access because time was critical. I saved that deal. I saved the company millions of dollars. That's not the point. Marcus finally spoke, his voice apologetic in a way that made Lena's stomach turn. The point is that you acted without following procedure. You put the entire system at risk by working outside the established framework. I put the system at risk? Lena looked at him directly. Brandon's team had 4 hours and accomplished nothing. I had a solution, and I asked for permission before implementing it. The CEO himself approved my access. How is that a violation? Patricia opened a folder on her desk. Mr. Vale has been contacted regarding this incident. He acknowledges that he granted you verbal authorization, but has stated that he was not fully aware of the scope of the security protocols you would need to bypass. He has deferred to IT leadership regarding the technical assessment of your actions. The floor seemed to tilt beneath Lena's chair. He what? Mr. Vale has indicated, Patricia continued, reading from what appeared to be an official statement, that while he appreciates your initiative in a crisis situation, he recognizes that proper procedures exist for a reason and supports IT leadership in addressing potential security vulnerabilities created by unauthorized access. Lena felt something cold and sharp lodge itself in her chest. Adrian had thrown her under the bus. No, that wasn't quite right. He'd stepped aside and let others push her there while he maintained plausible deniability. Corporate cowardice disguised as deference to expertise. I want to speak with Mr. Vale directly, Lena said. That won't be possible. Patricia's smile was professionally sympathetic. Mr. Vale is in meetings all day regarding the Meridian acquisition. He's asked that this matter be handled at the departmental level. Of course he has. The words came out bitter, and Lena didn't try to hide it. Brandon shifted in his seat. Look, Lena, no one is saying you had malicious intent. We understand you thought you were helping, but the reality is that you accessed systems you weren't cleared for, made modifications that could have gone catastrophically wrong, and all of this happened outside of any oversight or accountability. I had oversight. The CEO was there the entire time. A CEO who isn't a technical expert and couldn't have properly assessed the risks you were taking. Brandon's tone was almost gentle now, which somehow made it worse. You put him in a position where he felt he had to support you in the moment, but that doesn't change the fact that what you did violated fundamental security principles. Lena looked at Marcus. You're going to let them do this? You know I saved that deal. You know I did the right thing. Marcus looked deeply uncomfortable. I think the issue is that there's a right way to do the right thing, and you didn't follow the right way. The right way would have taken hours we didn't have. The deal would have collapsed. Maybe, Marcus shifted, or maybe if you'd brought it to me first, we could have escalated it properly through IT channels and achieved the same result without all these complications. You weren't here. You'd gone home. Everyone had gone home except me. And that's admirable, Lena. It really is. Patricia folded her hands on her desk. But it doesn't change the fact that you made a unilateral decision that had massive implications for company security. We have protocols for a reason. They're not suggestions. So what happens now? Lena asked, though she already knew. She could see it in their faces. The decision had been made before she'd walked into the room. This wasn't an investigation. It was a sentencing. Patricia pulled out another document. Given the severity of the security violations and the risk posed to company systems, we're recommending immediate reassignment. You'll be moved out of data analytics, effective today, to a position where you won't have access to sensitive systems or critical projects. Reassignment. Lena tasted the word. You mean demotion. We prefer to call it lateral movement, Patricia said. You'll maintain your current salary level for the next 90 days while we assess. Where? Patricia paused. I'm sorry. Where are you reassigning me? A brief glance passed between Patricia and Brandon. Records management, 4th floor, East Wing. You'll be working with Evelyn Cross, helping to organize and digitize historical company documentation. Records management, the corporate equivalent of exile. A windowless office in the forgotten corner of a forgotten floor, filing paperwork no one would ever read. It's where they sent people they couldn't fire but wanted to disappear. And if I refuse, Lena asked quietly, then we'll have no choice but to escalate this to a formal disciplinary review, which could result in termination. Patricia's voice remained pleasant, professional. But we'd really prefer not to do that, Lena. You're a valued employee. We want to work with you to move past this incident. Valued. Right. Lena looked at each of them in turn, Patricia with her practiced sympathy, Brandon with his self-righteous vindication, Marcus with his cowardly guilt. She looked at the folder on Patricia's desk, at the pre-written reassignment paperwork, at the careful choreography of this entire meeting. They'd planned this. All of it. Probably started the moment Adrian had sent that email crediting her work, the moment she'd become visible enough to be a threat. She thought about fighting it, demanding to speak with Adrian directly, going over their heads, making noise. But she'd made noise before. And every time it had ended the same way, with her being quietly moved to somewhere she could be forgotten. At least this time she'd saved something worth saving. Fine, Lena said. When do I start? Patricia actually smiled. We'd like you to clear out your desk today. You can begin in records management tomorrow morning. Evelyn is expecting you at 8. Of course she is, Lena stood. The meeting was clearly over. She turned toward the door, then stopped. For what it's worth, she said without looking back, I did save that deal, and I'd do it again, exactly the same way. Because sometimes doing the right thing matters more than following the rules. That's a very principled stance, Patricia said. But principles don't protect data systems, Lena. Protocols do. Lena left without responding. She took the stairs down to the 4th floor, not trusting herself in an elevator where she might run into people she knew, people who would ask questions she didn't have the energy to answer. The data analytics department was already buzzing with the morning routine, coffee brewing, computers humming, the low murmur of colleagues discussing projects and deadlines. Her desk looked exactly as she'd left it 2 days ago. A small, succulent plant that refused to die despite her neglect. A photo of her younger sister's wedding. A ceramic mug that said, I'm not arguing, I'm just explaining why I'm right. That a former colleague had given her as a joke. Lena pulled a cardboard box from the supply closet and began packing. Lena? She turned. Sarah Kim, one of the junior analysts she'd mentored, stood at the entrance to her cubicle with wide, confused eyes. What are you doing? Reassignment, Lena said simply. I'm moving to records management. What? Why? I heard you saved the Meridian deal. Everyone's talking about… Sarah, don't. Lena kept packing. Just don't. But that's not fair. You literally saved the company and they're demoting you? It's not a demotion. It's a lateral move. The words tasted like ash. Sarah stared at her. You're just going to accept this? What choice do I have? Lena picked up the photo, wrapped it carefully in tissue paper. Fight it and get fired? Make noise and end up blacklisted? I've played this game before, Sarah. I know how it ends. So you just give up? Lena looked at her. 24 years old, still bright-eyed with the belief that hard work and competence mattered, that the system rewarded merit. Lena remembered being that person. It felt like a lifetime ago. I'm not giving up. I'm surviving. She placed the wrapped photo in the box. There's a difference. Sarah opened her mouth to respond, but Marcus appeared at the cubicle entrance. Lena, can I have a word? Privately? Sarah shot Marcus a look of pure disgust before walking away. Marcus stepped into the small space, hands in his pockets, looking everywhere except at Lena. I want you to know I didn't want this, he said quietly. I argued against the reassignment. I told Patricia you'd acted in good faith. How noble of you. I mean it, but Brandon was… He was really pushing for disciplinary action. I managed to get it down to just reassignment. I thought you'd prefer that to being fired. Lena turned to face him fully. You want credit for negotiating my exile instead of my execution? Marcus flinched. That's not fair. You're right. What's not fair is me working through the night to save a deal that would have made your department look like heroes, and then being punished for it while you stand there pretending you tried to help. She picked up her succulent. What's not fair is you sitting in that meeting and talking about the right way to do the right thing when you know damn well there was no time for proper channels. What's not fair is you using words like valued employee when what you really mean is useful scapegoat. Lena, did you know? The question came out sharp, sudden. Before I walked into that meeting, did you know what they were going to do? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Brandon called me last night, told me there were going to be consequences for the security breach. He asked me if I thought you were a team player. And what did you say? I said you were competent, but sometimes struggled with authority. Lena actually laughed, a short, humorless sound. Of course you did. I was trying to protect you. If I'd defended you too strongly, Brandon would have pushed for immediate termination. I thought if I gave them a middle ground, they'd just give you a warning. Well, you thought wrong. Lena closed the box, picked it up. Anything else, Marcus? Any other half measures you want to confess to? I'm sorry. He looked genuinely miserable. For what it's worth, I really am sorry. It's worth exactly as much as it cost you to say it. Lena moved past him toward the elevator, which is nothing. She didn't look back. The elevator ride down to the east wing of the 4th floor felt longer than it should have. Lena watched the numbers descend, 4, 3, 2, lobby, then back up to 4, and tried to identify the emotion sitting in her chest like a stone. It wasn't anger. Anger would have meant she'd expected better. It wasn't even disappointment. It was something closer to resignation. The weary acceptance of someone who'd learned that the world operated on rules that had nothing to do with fairness or merit. The East Wing was exactly as depressing as she'd imagined. Fluorescent lights humming slightly out of phase, beige walls that might have been white once, the smell of old paper and older coffee. Records management occupied a suite of rooms at the far end of the hallway. Through the glass door, Lena could see rows of filing cabinets, boxes stacked on industrial shelving, and a single desk where an elderly woman with silver hair sat reading a newspaper. Evelyn Cross. Lena had heard of her. Everyone had. She'd been with Vale Industries since its founding, back when it was just Adrian's father running a small tech startup out of a garage. She'd seen the company grow from 12 employees to 12,000, had outlasted 7 restructurings and countless regime changes. She was the living memory of Vale Industries, and also its most overlooked asset. Lena pushed open the door. Evelyn looked up from her newspaper, actual newsprint, not a tablet, and studied Lena over her reading glasses with eyes that were sharp and assessing. Lena Hart, she said. Not a question. Right on time. I appreciate punctuality. Ms. Cross, I was told to report here this morning. You were told many things, I imagine. Evelyn folded her newspaper with careful precision. Very few of them true. Come in, child. Close the door behind you, and for heaven's sake, call me Evelyn. Ms. Cross makes me sound like a school teacher, which I am not, and have never aspired to be. Lena stepped inside, closing the door. The office was larger than she'd expected, but somehow the size made it feel more isolated rather than less, like being in a warehouse of forgotten things. I suppose they told you this was punishment, Evelyn said, gesturing to a chair across from her desk. Banishment to the land of dusty files and obsolete documentation, the corporate equivalent of Siberia. Something like that. And you, of course, have decided you deserve it. Evelyn's tone was matter of fact. You're sitting there thinking about all the ways you could have done things differently, all the political calculations you should have made. You're blaming yourself for being too honest, too direct, too competent at inconvenient times. Lena blinked. How do you? Because I've watched it happen 43 times in the last 32 years. Evelyn stood, moving to a filing cabinet with surprising grace for someone who had to be in her 70s. Bright young people who do exceptional work and get punished for it by mediocre managers who feel threatened. It's one of the few constants in this company. She pulled out a file and handed it to Lena. Your personnel record, complete, unredacted, including notes that HR thinks are confidential. Evelyn's smile was thin. People forget that records management has access to everything. We're invisible, you see, like furniture, so they're careless about what they say and write around us. Lena opened the file. Her entire history at Vail Industries was there. Performance reviews, promotion recommendations, disciplinary notes. But there were also things she'd never seen before. Emails between managers discussing her, memos about cultural fit concerns, notes from supervisors describing her as technically proficient but politically naive. Marcus wrote that I lacked the temperament for leadership, Lena read aloud, disbelief coloring her voice. 6 months before he recommended me for promotion. He also wrote that you were the most talented analyst in the department, Evelyn said. He just knew better than to put that in an official recommendation after you'd embarrassed his predecessor. Corporate politics, child. The nail that sticks up gets hammered down. Lena flipped through more pages. A pattern emerged. Brilliant work followed by punishment, recognition followed by exile. Over and over for 4 years. Why are you showing me this? Because I want you to understand something very important. Evelyn sat back down, folding her hands on her desk. This isn't about you. It never was. You're convenient, not culpable. Brandon Reeves has been looking for a way to discredit anyone who challenges his authority ever since the security audit you conducted last year. You made him look incompetent. He's been waiting for an opportunity to return the favor. So this was planned. The moment Adrian Vail sent that email crediting your work, you became a target. Evelyn's voice was gentle but firm. They couldn't let you be the hero. It would have exposed their failure. So they turned your success into a security breach and your competence into insubordination. And Adrian just let them. Adrian Vail is a brilliant businessman and a good man, but he's also a CEO who depends on his executive team to function. When Brandon and Patricia presented him with their version of events, unauthorized access, security risks, protocol violations, what was he supposed to think? He wasn't there for the 4 hours before you contacted him. He only saw the midnight emergency and the morning success. Brandon filled in the gaps with carefully chosen truths. Lena closed the file. So what am I supposed to do now? Just accept this? You're supposed to work for me, organize historical documentation, and wait. Wait for what? Evelyn's smile turned mysterious. For the truth to matter more than the narrative. For the right moment. For someone in power to actually care about what really happened, she paused. And while you wait, you learn. This office has records going back 35 years. Every major decision, every corporate scandal, every executive rise and fall, it's all here. You want to understand how Vail Industries really works? You want to see the patterns that determine who succeeds and who gets sacrificed? I'll teach you. Why would you do that? Because 43 times I've watched talented people get destroyed by this system, and 43 times I've been too old, too invisible, or too cowardly to help them. Evelyn met Lena's eyes. Maybe the 44th time I can do better. Lena felt something shift in her chest. Not hope exactly, but something adjacent to it. The possibility that this exile might become something else. Okay, she said quietly. Teach me. Evelyn nodded, satisfied. Then let's begin with the Meridian acquisition. Pull the files from the 2019 vendor negotiations. I want you to see how this particular disaster was 5 years in the making. As Lena moved to the filing cabinets, Evelyn returned to her newspaper. But before she opened it, she said one more thing. And Lena, what you did that night, saving the deal, taking the risk, doing the work no one else would, that mattered. Don't let them convince you otherwise. Lena nodded, not trusting her voice, and pulled the first file. By noon, she'd learned more about Vail Industries' internal politics than she had in 4 years of working there. By evening, she understood exactly how many times the company had almost destroyed itself through executive incompetence disguised as strategic vision. And by the time she left that night, exhausted but somehow steadier than she'd been in days, Lena Hart had begun to see her exile not as an ending, but as an education. The kind of education that taught you exactly where the bodies were buried, and who had buried them. 3 weeks passed before Adrian realized something was wrong. Not wrong in the obvious way. The Meridian deal had closed successfully. Stock prices had climbed. The board had congratulated him on navigating a potential disaster with characteristic Vale composure. Everything, by every measurable metric, was perfect. But perfection had started to feel hollow. It began with small things. Sophie asking why he looked sad when he smiled. His assistant commenting that he seemed distracted during meetings. The way his reflection in the office windows at night looked less like a CEO and more like a man trying to remember something important he'd forgotten. He'd tried to contact Lena twice in the weeks following the Meridian crisis. The first time, 3 days after the deal closed, he'd called down to data analytics only to be told she no longer worked in that department. When he'd asked where she'd been transferred, there'd been an uncomfortable pause before Marcus Chen had gotten on the line. Mr. Vale, Lena's been reassigned to records management. There were some protocol concerns regarding the server access. HR handled it. All very routine. Nothing about Marcus's voice had sounded routine. Adrian had meant to follow up, to ask questions, to understand what protocol concerns meant when someone had just saved the company millions of dollars. But then there'd been another crisis and another meeting and another 100 things demanding his attention, and Lena Hart had slipped back into the same invisibility she'd occupied before that midnight emergency. Until tonight, Adrian sat in his office at 9:47 p.m., the city sprawling below him in its usual symphony of light and motion, reviewing quarterly performance reports that should have been routine. Data Analytics had submitted their assessment of the Meridian recovery, and something about it felt wrong. The report credited swift action by IT leadership and coordinated crisis management protocols for the successful data recovery. It mentioned emergency procedures and cross-departmental collaboration. It was thorough, professional, and completely devoid of truth. Lena's name appeared exactly once, in a footnote, describing her as support staff who assisted with file verification under IT supervision. Support staff. Adrian read the line 3 times, each reading sharpening his discomfort into something closer to anger. He pulled up his email from the morning after the crisis, the one where he'd explicitly credited Lena's work, where he'd detailed exactly what she'd accomplished. He found the thread, opened it, and discovered that his original email had been amended with a note from Brandon Reeves. Mr. Vale's initial assessment was based on incomplete information. Subsequent investigation revealed that the recovery was achieved through coordinated IT team efforts, utilizing established protocols. Ms. Hart's unauthorized access created additional security risks that required remediation. The amendment was dated 2 days after Adrian's original email. He'd never seen it, never been asked to approve it. Someone had simply revised the record. Adrian felt something cold settle in his chest. He picked up his phone and dialed Marcus Chen's direct line. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail. He tried Brandon Reeves. Same result. Patricia Hendricks from HR. Voicemail again. It was almost 10 o'clock on a Thursday night. Of course, no one was answering. But the pattern of non-response felt deliberate. Adrian stood, grabbed his jacket, and headed for the elevator. If no one would tell him what happened to Lena Hart, he'd find out himself. Records management was dark when Adrian arrived, the east wing of the 4th floor lit only by emergency lighting that cast everything in shades of gray and shadow. He tried the door, locked, peered through the glass into an office that looked more like an archive than a workspace. She leaves at 6. Adrian turned. An older woman stood in the hallway behind him, wearing a cardigan over a floral dress, holding a travel mug that probably contained tea based on the faint herbal scent. "Evelyn Cross," she said, extending her free hand. "Records management. And you're Adrian Vale, though I suspect you knew that already." Adrian shook her hand, momentarily off balance. "I was looking for Lena Hart." "So I gathered." Evelyn's smile was knowing. "Took you 3 weeks. I'd wondered if you'd notice at all." "Notice what?" "That you'd sacrifice someone to save your own reputation." Evelyn's tone wasn't accusatory, just factual. "Come with me, Mr. Vale. If you're going to have this conversation, you should have it sitting down." She unlocked the records management door and gestured him inside. The office was larger than Adrian had expected, filled with filing cabinets and archive boxes organized with meticulous precision. Evelyn's desk sat near the window, and across from it was another desk, newer, with a computer and a small succulent plant that Adrian recognized with a jolt of memory. "Lena works here now," he said quietly. Has for 3 weeks. Evelyn settled into her chair, gesturing for Adrian to sit across from her. 8 to 6, Monday through Friday, organizing 35 years of corporate documentation. She's very good at it, detail-oriented, doesn't complain, shows up on time and leaves exactly when her shift ends. What happened? You don't know? Evelyn studied him over the rim of her tea mug. Or you don't want to know? If I knew, I wouldn't be here at 10 o'clock at night asking you. Evelyn considered this, then set down her mug. Your head of IT and your HR director decided that Lena's midnight heroics represented a security breach. They called her into a meeting the morning after the Meridian deal closed and gave her a choice: accept reassignment to records management or face termination for protocol violations. Adrian felt the floor tilt slightly beneath his chair. That's impossible. I authorized her access. I was there the entire time. She didn't violate anything. Your authorization, apparently, wasn't sufficient. Evelyn pulled a file from her desk drawer and slid it across to him. This is the internal investigation report. You'll notice it characterizes your midnight text message as informal emergency communication rather than executive authorization. It suggests you weren't fully aware of the security implications of granting Lena system access. Adrian opened the file, scanning quickly through bureaucratic language that twisted the truth into something unrecognizable. I never saw this report. You weren't supposed to. It was handled at the departmental level. HR policy allows for disciplinary action without executive review in cases of security violations. This wasn't a security violation. This was someone doing her job. Yes, Evelyn said simply, but it was also someone making your IT department look incompetent. Brandon Reeves had 4 hours to fix the corruption and failed. Lena had 5 hours and succeeded. That kind of comparison tends to make insecure men do vindictive things. Adrian closed the file, processing. Why didn't she fight it? Why didn't she come to me? She tried. Patricia Hendricks told her you were too busy with Meridian meetings to be disturbed, that you delegated the matter to departmental leadership. Evelyn's voice softened slightly. And Lena, she's been through this before, Mr. Vale. Multiple times. She knows how these things end. Fighting just makes the punishment worse. So she accepted exile. She accepted survival. Evelyn leaned back in her chair. There's a difference, though I don't expect someone in your position to understand it intuitively. Adrian looked at the second desk, Lena's desk, the succulent, a photo he couldn't quite see from this angle, a coffee mug that said something he couldn't read in the dim light. I need to fix this, he said. Do you? Evelyn's tone was challenging. Or do you need to feel like you fixed it so you can sleep better at night? What's the difference? The difference is whether you're doing this for her or for yourself. Evelyn stood, moving to one of the filing cabinets. You want to fix this, Mr. Vale? Then you need to understand that this isn't an isolated incident. It's a pattern, a system. She pulled out another file, then another, stacking them on the desk between them. Emily Rodriguez, 2019, identified critical flaws in a product launch timeline, demoted for not being a team player, left the company 6 months later. Another file. James Park, 2021, reported financial irregularities in a vendor contract, reassigned to a position with no advancement potential, resigned within the year. Another. Catherine Moss, 2017, challenged a VP's strategic direction on a failing project, moved to a satellite office 3 states away, quit before the transfer. The stack grew. 7 files. 10. 15. This is what happens at Vale Industries, Mr. Vale. Smart people identify problems. Weak leaders punish them for it. The smart people leave or learn to be quiet, and the company gets progressively run by people whose primary skill is avoiding accountability. Adrian stared at the files. I built this company. Your father built this company. You inherited it and scaled it. Evelyn's voice wasn't unkind. But somewhere in the scaling, you stopped paying attention to the foundation. You trusted the wrong people to maintain the culture. And now you have a system where the Lena Harts of the world save your company at midnight and get destroyed by morning. I didn't know. That's not an excuse. That's an abdication. Evelyn sat back down. You're the CEO. Not knowing is a choice you made every time you prioritized growth over culture. Every time you let mediocre managers empire build. Every time you delegated integrity to people who had none. The words hit like physical blows, not because they were cruel, but because they were true. Adrian thought about the last 2 years since his wife died, the way he'd thrown himself into work, into expansion, into anything that kept him from feeling the grief. He'd been present but absent, leading but not seeing, building an empire while the foundation rotted beneath him. "Tell me how to fix it," he said quietly. "You can't. Not tonight. Not with a grand gesture." Evelyn pulled the files back toward her. "But you can start by finding out exactly what happened. Not the sanitized version in HR reports. The truth. Every email, every meeting, every decision point. You can stop trusting the people who benefit from the system and start listening to the people the system crushes." "Will Lena talk to me?" "I don't know. She's become very good at being invisible." Evelyn studied him. "But I can tell you this. She doesn't want her job back. She doesn't want an apology. What she wants is to know that what happened to her mattered enough that it won't happen to someone else." Adrian stood. "Thank you for this. For showing me." "Don't thank me yet. You haven't done anything worth gratitude." Evelyn walked him to the door. "But Mr. Vale, if you're serious about fixing this, start by asking yourself why it took you 3 weeks to notice that someone who saved your company had disappeared." Adrian left records management with the weight of 15 personnel files pressing against his conscience, and the uncomfortable realization that Evelyn was right. He hadn't noticed because he hadn't wanted to notice, because noticing meant responsibility, and responsibility meant change. The elevator ride back to his office felt different now, not ascending toward power, but descending into something he couldn't quite name. Shame, maybe, or the first stirrings of something that might eventually become integrity. Back at his desk, Adrian opened his laptop and began digging. He started with email archives, searching for Lena's name in internal communications. What he found made his stomach turn. Brandon Reeves to Patricia Hendricks the morning after the Meridian success. "We need to address the heart situation before it becomes a precedent. If analysts think they can bypass IT protocols with CEO blessing, we lose all authority." Patricia's response: "Agreed. I'll handle the disciplinary meeting. You draft the security violation report. Keep it technical. Vale won't question technical assessments." Marcus Chen, copied on both emails, had responded with a single word: "Understood." No one had questioned it. No one had pushed back. They'd simply executed the plan with bureaucratic efficiency. Adrian kept digging. He found the amended email thread where his credit to Lena had been quietly revised, found the memo Brandon had circulated to IT leadership characterizing Lena as a rogue actor who'd exploited a crisis situation for personal advancement, found performance reviews Marcus had written that praised Lena's technical skills while questioning her cultural alignment and collaborative approach. The paper trail was a masterclass in corporate character assassination, but it was also sloppy, because in their rush to bury Lena, they'd left evidence, timestamps that didn't align with their narratives, email threads that contradicted their official reports, small inconsistencies that individually meant nothing but collectively painted a picture of deliberate deception. Adrian pulled his phone and texted his executive assistant. "Cancel my morning meetings, all of them. I need the conference room blocked from 8 a.m. to noon, and I need Brandon Reeves, Patricia Hendricks, and Marcus Chen there at 8:30. Non-negotiable." The response came quickly. "Done. Everything okay?" Adrian stared at the question for a long moment before typing, "It will be." He worked through the night, building his case with the same meticulous attention to detail that Lena had brought to the Meridian recovery. By 4 a.m., he had a timeline. By 5 a.m., he had documentation. By 6 a.m., he had clarity. And by 7 a.m., watching the sunrise paint the city in shades of gold and shadow, Adrian Vale understood something he should have learned years ago. Power wasn't about control. It was about seeing the people no one else noticed. And finally, choosing to stand beside them. At 8:25 a.m., Adrian walked into the executive conference room where Brandon Reeves, Patricia Hendricks, and Marcus Chen sat waiting with varying expressions of confusion and concern. "Good morning," Adrian said, closing the door behind him. "Thank you for coming on short notice." "Of course, Mr. Vale." Patricia smiled professionally. "What can we help you with?" "I want to talk about Lena Hart." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Brandon shifted in his seat. If this is about the security protocols, I can provide additional documentation. I've seen the documentation. Adrian remained standing, letting the height differential create the dynamic he wanted. I've also seen the email thread where you and Patricia coordinated her disciplinary meeting. The memo where you characterized her as a rogue actor. The performance reviews where Marcus praised her skills while systematically undermining her advancement. Marcus went pale. Mr. Vale, I can explain. Please do. Explain to me how someone who saved this company millions of dollars ended up in records management within 72 hours. Silence. No? Adrian pulled out his laptop, connected it to the conference room screen. Then let me explain it. You felt threatened. Lena made you look incompetent, Brandon, by succeeding where your team had failed. That embarrassment was unacceptable, so you turned her success into a security breach. The screen filled with email excerpts, timestamps, contradictory statements. You helped, Patricia, by characterizing my authorization as informal communication. You created a paper trail that suggested I didn't understand what I was approving, which gave you cover to discipline Lena without my oversight. Patricia's professional smile had frozen into something brittle. And you, Marcus, you were her supervisor. You knew she'd acted in good faith. You could have defended her. Instead, you called her politically naive and let her take the fall to protect your own standing with IT leadership. Marcus stared at the table. It wasn't personal. That makes it worse. Adrian advanced the slides. Because if it was personal, at least there'd be passion. But this was calculated cowardice. You sacrificed someone talented and dedicated because protecting her would have been inconvenient. Brandon found his voice. With all due respect, Mr. Vale, this was handled according to established protocols. HR policy clearly states, HR policy exists to protect the company, not to punish competence. Adrian cut him off. And you didn't protect the company. You protected your ego. There's a difference. The security risks were real, Brandon insisted. Unauthorized access to critical systems. I authorized it. I was there. I watched her work for 5 hours. At no point did she compromise security. She saved us. Adrian let that hang in the air, but you couldn't let her be the hero because it made you the villain. So you rewrote the story. Patricia cleared her throat. Mr. Vale, if you're suggesting we acted improperly, I'm not suggesting anything. I'm telling you that you destroyed someone's career to cover your own failures, and I let you do it because I was too busy, too distracted, too willing to trust that my executive team had integrity. He closed his laptop. That ends today. Brandon's face had gone red. You're firing us over one analyst? No. Adrian's voice was ice. I'm firing you because Lena isn't the first. She's just the most recent. He pulled out the files Evelyn had shown him, dropping them on the conference table. 15 employees in the last 6 years, all of them talented, all of them punished for identifying problems or challenging incompetence, all of them driven out by a system that rewards mediocrity and punishes excellence. He looked at each of them in turn. That system ends now. Brandon, Patricia, you're terminated effective immediately. HR will handle the details. Security will escort you out within the hour. Patricia stood abruptly. You can't do this. I have contracts, protections. You violated company ethics policy. I have documentation of coordinated employee retaliation. Your contracts have termination clauses for cause. Read them. Adrian's tone left no room for negotiation. Brandon was shaking with rage. This is a mistake. The board will hear about this. The board will receive my full report, including all the documentation I've compiled. If you'd like to challenge this termination, I welcome the discovery process. I have nothing to hide. Do you? Brandon grabbed his phone and walked out without another word. Patricia followed, her heels sharp against the floor. Marcus remained seated, looking like he might be sick. What about me? He asked quietly. Adrian studied him for a long moment. You're not fired, but you're on notice. I want a full department review on my desk in 2 weeks. Every analyst, every project, every performance metric. And Marcus, if I find out you've retaliated against anyone who cooperated with that review, or if I see any sign that you're continuing to prioritize politics over competence, you'll follow Brandon and Patricia out the door. Understood. One more thing. You're going to call Lena Hart. You're going to apologize, a real apology, not corporate speak. And you're going to tell her that her reassignment was unjust and that it's being reversed. Marcus looked up sharply. You're bringing her back to data analytics? I'm offering her a choice. Data analytics or any other department she wants. With a promotion and a salary adjustment that reflects what she's actually worth to this company. The other analysts will wonder why. Then tell them the truth, that she was punished for being competent and you let it happen. Adrian moved toward the door. Transparency, Marcus. It's a radical concept. Try it. He left Marcus sitting alone in the conference room, surrounded by the evidence of his own cowardice, and headed for the elevators. It was 9:47 a.m. Lena would be in records management by now, organizing files, being invisible. Adrian rode down to the 4th floor with his heart beating faster than it had during any board meeting or investor pitch. This conversation mattered more than any deal he'd closed or any crisis he'd navigated, because this was about something he'd lost somewhere in the climb to the top. The ability to see people as people, not as resources or problems or footnotes in corporate reports. He walked through the East Wing, past offices that still felt like exile, and knocked on the records management door. Evelyn opened it, unsurprised. That was faster than I expected, she said. Is she here? Evelyn stepped aside, revealing Lena at her desk, staring at Adrian with an expression somewhere between shock and wariness. I'll give you two some privacy, Evelyn said, gathering her tea mug. I'll be in the archive room if you need me. She left, closing the door behind her. Adrian and Lena looked at each other across the small office. Hi, Adrian said, then immediately felt stupid. Sorry, I'm not sure how to start this conversation. You could start by explaining why you're here. Lena's voice was carefully neutral. I assume Marcus called you. No, I came here last night, talked to Evelyn. She showed me what really happened. Lena's expression didn't change. And now you want to fix it. Yes. Why? The question was simple, but the answer wasn't. Because I was wrong, Adrian said finally. Because I built a system that punished you for saving my company. Because I should have noticed 3 weeks ago instead of last night. Because... He stopped, searching for honesty. Because when I worked with you that night, I remembered what it felt like to care about the work instead of just the outcome. And I want to build a company where people like you don't get destroyed for being good at what they do. Lena was quiet for a long moment. Brandon and Patricia are gone, Adrian continued. Fired this morning. Marcus is on notice. I want to offer you your position back in data analytics, with a promotion to senior analyst, 15% salary increase, and a formal apology on the record from me for what happened. I don't want it. The words hit harder than Adrian had expected. I don't want my job back. Lena stood, facing him directly. I don't want an apology. I don't want gestures. Then what do you want? I want to know that this matters. Her voice was steady but intense. I want to know that the next person who does the right thing won't end up in records management. I want to know that you're actually fixing the system, not just fixing this one situation so you can feel better about yourself. Adrian met her eyes. You're right. That's exactly what I need to do. And I can't do it alone. What does that mean? It means I need someone who understands what's broken, someone who's been through it, someone who gives a damn about making it better. He paused. It means I'm offering you a different position, special projects. Report directly to me. Your job would be to find the problems everyone else is ignoring and fix them before they become crises. Lena stared at him. You're serious? Completely. Same salary increase, better office, and I promise you I will never let anyone punish you for telling me the truth again. You can't promise that. You're right, but I can promise I'll try, and I can promise that if I fail, you'll have the authority to hold me accountable. Lena sat back down slowly, processing. I need to think about it, she said finally. Take all the time you need. She looked at him with something that might have been the beginning of trust. Thank you. For coming here. For noticing. I should have noticed sooner. Yes, Lena agreed. You should have. The honesty of it made Adrian smile despite everything. Does that mean you'll consider the offer? It means I'll think about it. A pause. And Adrian? The fact that you came here, that you fired them, That you're trying, it matters. I want you to know that. Adrian nodded, not trusting his voice, and left. In the hallway, Evelyn was waiting. Well, she asked. She's thinking about it. Good. She should. Evelyn started walking back toward her office. And Mr. Vale, don't make promises you can't keep. That girl's been disappointed enough. I know. Do you? Evelyn stopped, looking at him. Because fixing this isn't about grand gestures. It's about showing up every day and doing the work. It's about building a culture where people like Lena don't have to be heroes at midnight because the system actually functions during daylight. I understand. I hope so. Evelyn's smile was slight but genuine. Because if you actually pull this off, you might build something worth being proud of. She disappeared into records management, leaving Adrian alone in the hallway. He pulled out his phone and texted his assistant. I need a company-wide meeting scheduled for next week, all employees, mandatory attendance, and I need to talk to our board chair today. The response? On it. What's this about? Adrian looked at the closed door of records management, thought about Lena sitting inside, thought about the 15 files of destroyed careers, thought about the company he'd built without seeing what he was building. He typed back, change. The board meeting started badly and deteriorated from there. Adrian sat at the head of the polished mahogany table in the executive boardroom on the 49th floor, facing 9 men and women who collectively controlled enough voting shares to remove him as CEO if they decided he'd become a liability. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows behind them, the city stretched out in afternoon sunlight, indifferent to the corporate drama unfolding in this temperature-controlled room. Richard Castellano, board chair and one of his father's oldest friends, leaned back in his leather chair with the expression of a man who'd been interrupted during golf. Let me make sure I understand correctly, Richard said, his voice carrying that particular blend of patience and condescension that wealthy men perfected over decades. You fired your head of IT and your HR director without consulting the board, without severance negotiations, without legal review, because of an incident involving a junior analyst. Senior analyst, Adrian corrected. And it wasn't one incident. It was a pattern of retaliation against employees who identified problems. A pattern you've documented in, 3 weeks of investigation? Jennifer Moss, the board's youngest member and typically Adrian's strongest ally, looked genuinely concerned. Adrian, this seems rushed, impulsive. It's neither. I have documentation going back 6 years, 15 employees targeted, email evidence of coordinated retaliation, clear violations of company ethics policy. Documentation provided by whom? This from Thomas Wright, former CEO of a competing firm and perpetually skeptical of anything that smelled like sentiment. Your source is the records management department, not exactly an objective investigator. The source is company files, public record, email servers, performance reviews, all of it verifiable. Richard held up a hand. Adrian, no one's questioning your evidence. We're questioning your judgment. Brandon Reeves has been with this company for 12 years. Patricia Hendricks built our entire HR infrastructure from scratch. These aren't junior employees you can dismiss on a whim. I didn't dismiss them on a whim. I dismissed them for cause. Cause that you determined unilaterally. Richard's tone sharpened. You do understand that Brandon has already retained legal counsel? That he's threatening a wrongful termination suit that could cost this company millions in legal fees alone? Adrian had expected this. Let him sue. Discovery will expose exactly what he did. We'll win. Maybe. Probably. Jennifer leaned forward. But at what cost? The publicity alone could damage investor confidence. And Adrian, I have to ask, is this really about ethics violations? Or is this about guilt? The question landed like a punch. Excuse me? Marcus Chen called me this morning. He's worried about you. He said you've been fixated on this Lena Hart situation, that you're taking personal responsibility for decisions that were made by your management team following established protocols. Those protocols were being weaponized. According to whom? An employee who was disciplined for security violations? Thomas's skepticism had hardened into something sharper. I've read the IT report, unauthorized server access, bypassed encryption protocols. From where I sit, your HR department handled it by the book. The book was wrong, or your judgment is compromised. Richard's voice softened, which somehow made it worse. Adrian, we all know the last 2 years have been difficult. Losing Sarah, raising Sophie alone, managing the company. No one would blame you for being under strain, but this feels like you're making decisions based on emotion rather than business sense. Adrian felt heat rising in his chest. This has nothing to do with Sarah. Doesn't it? Jennifer's concern looked genuine. You met this analyst during a midnight crisis. She reminded you of something you'd lost. Passion for the work, maybe? Or the early days when the company was small and everyone mattered. You formed an attachment. When she was disciplined, you took it personally. I took it seriously. There's a difference. Is there? Thomas pulled out his tablet, scrolling through something. Because, from where I sit, you've upended 2 executive positions, threatened a third, and promised a junior analyst a direct reporting line to the CEO, all based on your interpretation of events that your own management team views very differently. My management team coordinated to bury someone who made them look incompetent. Your management team maintained operational standards during a crisis. Richard's patience was clearly thinning. Adrian, I'm going to be blunt. The board is concerned. This kind of impulsive decision-making, this emotional investment in a single employee, this willingness to burn down established systems, it suggests someone who's lost perspective. What it suggests, Adrian said carefully, is someone who's finally paying attention to what he built. The room went quiet. Adrian stood, moving to the windows. Below, people moved through their lives, walking, driving, working, completely unaware that 49 floors above them, the future of their employer was being decided by 9 people in expensive suits. When my father started this company, Adrian said, still looking out at the city, he knew every employee's name. He knew their families. He knew who was brilliant and who was struggling and who needed a chance. The company was small enough that culture wasn't something you managed. It was something you lived. He turned back to face the board. I scaled what he built, grew it from hundreds of employees to thousands, made us profitable, made us powerful, and somewhere in that growth, I stopped seeing people and started seeing resources. I trusted my executive team to maintain culture while I focused on expansion. That was a mistake. So you've decided to correct that mistake by firing executives and promoting analysts. Thomas didn't bother hiding his sarcasm. Very inspiring, also very expensive and legally complicated. I've decided to correct that mistake by actually leading instead of just managing. Adrian returned to his seat. And yes, that means making hard decisions. It means cleaning out the people who built empires on burying problems. It means finding the people who've been invisible because they threaten mediocre managers. It means building a company where excellence is rewarded instead of punished. It also means, Richard said quietly, risking everything we've built on a principle that sounds noble in speeches but falls apart in practice. Adrian, be realistic. You can't run a company of 12,000 employees on personal integrity and individual attention. Systems exist for a reason. Hierarchies exist for a reason. Sometimes good people get caught in imperfect processes. That's unfortunate, but it's not a crisis. It is if we're the ones calling ourselves leaders while the system destroys people. Jennifer sighed. Adrian, I want to support you. I really do. But you're asking us to back a decision that could cost millions in legal fees, damage our reputation, and destabilize our management structure, all because one employee was reassigned. 15 employees, Adrian corrected, over 6 years. And it's not about the reassignment, it's about what the reassignment represents. We built a system where the wrong people have power, and the right people learn to be invisible. If we don't fix that, we don't deserve to succeed. Thomas snorted. Deserve. This isn't about deserving, it's about profit margins and shareholder value, and maintaining operational efficiency. And when operational efficiency means crushing competence to protect incompetence, what then? Then you coach your managers to do better. You don't blow up your executive team. Adrian looked around the table, reading the faces. Richard, skeptical but conflicted. Jennifer, sympathetic but worried. Thomas and the others. Various shades of concern ranging from financial to reputational. Not one of them understood what he was trying to do. Or maybe they understood perfectly and simply didn't care. I need to ask, Richard said after a long silence. Is this really about the company, or is this about Lena Hart specifically? Both, Adrian said honestly. Lena represents everything we're doing wrong, but she's not the only one. And if I can't fix what happened to her, I have no business calling myself a leader. Even if fixing it cost you your position? The threat hung in the air, unsubtle. Adrian met Richard's eyes. Even then. Richard exchanged glances with the other board members. Some wordless communication passed between them, the kind that happened when powerful people had known each other for decades. The board needs to discuss this privately, Richard said finally. We'll reconvene in 30 minutes. Adrian stood. Take all the time you need. He walked out of the boardroom into the executive hallway where his assistant Sarah looked up from her desk with anxious eyes. How bad? She asked quietly. They think I'm having a breakdown. Are you? Adrian actually laughed. Honestly, I don't know anymore. Maybe they're right. Maybe I am too emotionally invested. Maybe firing Brandon and Patricia was impulsive. But you don't think so? No, I think I've been asleep for 2 years and I finally woke up to find out I built something I don't recognize. He leaned against her desk. Sarah, when you look at Vail Industries, what do you see? She considered the question seriously. I see a successful company, good benefits, competitive pay, opportunities for advancement if you know how to play the game. And if you don't know how to play the game, then you either learn or you leave. She paused. Or you end up in records management. Does that seem right to you? Sarah looked uncomfortable. It seems normal. Every company has politics. Every workplace has people who get ahead and people who don't. But what if the people getting ahead are the wrong people? What if we're rewarding the ability to navigate politics instead of the ability to do excellent work? Then you change it. She met his eyes. But Adrian, changing it might cost you everything. Is it worth it? Before he could answer, his phone buzzed. A text from Lena. Can we talk? Not about the job. About something else. Adrian texted back. I'm at the office. Where are you? Records management. Can you come down? He glanced at Sarah. Tell them I'll be back in 20 minutes. Adrian, you can't leave in the middle of a board review. 20 minutes, he repeated, and headed for the elevators. The descent to the 4th floor felt like moving between worlds. The executive levels, all glass and steel and strategic silence. The operational floors, busier, messier, more human. And records management in the forgotten East Wing, where the company stored its history and its casualties. Lena was waiting outside the office when he arrived, holding a worn folder. I found something, she said without preamble. Evelyn showed me where to look. I thought you should see it before you go back to your board meeting. How did you know I have a board meeting? Sarah called down. She's worried about you. Lena held out the folder. This is from 2018, the last year your father was CEO before you took over. Adrian opened it. Inside were performance reviews, executive assessments, and a memo written in his father's distinctive handwriting. Read the memo, Lena said quietly. Adrian read, to the incoming CEO, presumably my son, though if Adrian's reading this, he's already inherited my mistakes along with my company. The hardest thing about building something successful is watching other people reshape it into something you no longer recognize. I built Vail Industries on a simple principle: find brilliant people and get out of their way. But somewhere in the growth, that principle got buried under processes and hierarchies and the kind of political maneuvering that rewards ambition over competence. I've tried to fix it. I've fired executives, restructured departments, implemented new policies. None of it stuck because I was treating symptoms instead of disease. The disease is simple. When you scale a company, you delegate culture to people who don't share your values. And once that happens, the culture becomes whatever serves those people's interests. By the time you read this, I'll be gone. And you'll face a choice I never solved. Do you burn it down and rebuild? Or do you accept that large organizations inevitably become political and focus on managing the politics instead of fighting them? I don't have an answer. But I can tell you this. Every time I chose politics over principle, I regretted it. Every time I let a good person get sacrificed to protect a bad system, I lost something I couldn't name but could feel missing. Whatever you choose it consciously. Don't sleepwalk into becoming the kind of leader you wouldn't respect. Adrian read the memo twice, his father's words hitting him like echoes from beyond the grave. When did he write this? Adrian asked quietly. 3 months before he died. Evelyn found it in his personal files. She said she's been waiting for the right time to show you. Lena's voice was soft. She thinks this is the right time. Adrian looked up from the memo. Why did you want me to see this? Because I wanted you to know that what you're trying to do, it's not crazy. Your father saw the same problems. He just never found a way to solve them. She paused. But maybe you can. My board thinks I'm having an emotional breakdown. Are you? I don't know. Maybe. Does it matter if I'm right? Lena smiled slightly. I think your father would say it matters more than being sane, Sheposin. Adrian carefully folded the memo, placing it back in the folder. The board wants me to back down. Reinstate Brandon and Patricia with apologies. Frame the whole thing as a misunderstanding. Will you? No. Even if they remove you as CEO? Adrian thought about his father's words, about the choice between politics and principle, about the kind of leader he wanted to be versus the kind he'd become. Even then, he said, I'd rather lose the position doing the right thing than keep it by betraying everything it should represent. Lena studied him for a long moment. Then I'll take the job, the special projects position. If you're serious about fixing this, I want to help. Even if I might not be CEO much longer? Especially then, because whoever takes over will need someone who understands what was broken and what you tried to build. She extended her hand. Partners? Adrian shook it. Partners. His phone buzzed. Sarah, board's ready for you. I have to go, Adrian said. But Lena, thank you for this, for believing this matters. It does matter. Just don't let them convince you it doesn't. Adrian rode the elevator back up to the executive floor with his father's memo in his jacket pocket and something that felt like purpose settling in his chest. The boardroom doors opened and 9 faces turned toward him, expressions ranging from sympathetic to hostile. Richard gestured to Adrian's seat. We've discussed your situation. Adrian sat, saying nothing. The board recognizes that you're facing unusual stress, Richard continued. Managing the company, raising your daughter alone, dealing with the aftermath of Sarah's death. We understand that these pressures can affect judgment. I appreciate your concern, Adrian said evenly, but my judgment is sound. Is it? Thomas leaned forward. Because we've reviewed the situation with Brandon Reeves. His attorney has presented a compelling case that he acted appropriately within his authority. The security protocols Lena Hart violated were legitimate. Your authorization was informal and didn't supersede established IT procedures. Those procedures were being used as weapons. That's your interpretation. IT leadership disagrees, HR disagrees, your own management team disagrees. Richard pulled out a document. We've drafted a proposal. You apologize to Brandon and Patricia, characterize their terminations as a misunderstanding. Reinstate them with a compensation package for the disruption. In return, they agree not to sue. The Lena Hart situation gets quietly resolved with a modest promotion and transfer, and we all move forward. No, Adrian said. Adrian, be reasonable. I am being reasonable. You're asking me to lie. To say that retaliation against competent employees was a misunderstanding. To reward people who built careers on burying problems. I won't do it. Jennifer spoke up, her voice gentle. Then what will you do? Because the board can't support a CEO who makes unilateral decisions that expose the company to legal liability. We have a fiduciary responsibility to shareholders. I understand that. I also have a responsibility to the 12,000 people who work here, to build a company where excellence matters more than politics, where the Lena Harts of the world don't get destroyed for being brilliant. That's an admirable sentiment, Richard said, but it's not a business strategy. Adrian pulled his father's memo from his pocket and placed it on the table. My father wrote this 3 months before he died. Read it. He slid it toward Richard, who picked it up with obvious reluctance. The board chair's expression shifted as he read. Surprise, then recognition, then something that might have been pain. He showed this to me once, Richard said quietly. I told him he was being too idealistic, that culture doesn't matter as much as results. And what did he say? He said that culture creates results, that everything else is just short-term thinking disguised as pragmatism. Richard set down the memo. I didn't listen. Are you listening now? Richard looked around the table, reading his fellow board members. Then back to Adrian. What exactly are you proposing? A complete culture audit, third-party firm, full access to all departments, all files, all employees. Let them document what's actually happening versus what we claim is happening. Then we rebuild from there. New policies, new accountability structures, new leadership where needed. That could take months, Thomas protested, and cost millions. It will cost more to keep pretending everything's fine while our best people leave or learn to be invisible. Adrian leaned forward. I'm not asking you to take this on faith. I'm asking you to look at the evidence. 15 employees in 6 years. High turnover in departments run by managers who don't tolerate dissent. Projects that fail because no one's willing to report problems until it's too late. We have a cultural disease, and it's killing us slowly. And firing Brandon and Patricia is your cure? Jennifer asked. It's the first step. Showing that retaliation has consequences. That protecting incompetence is no longer acceptable. That the system is changing. Richard was quiet for a long moment. If we support this, and I'm not saying we will, what happens with the wrongful termination suits? We defend them, publicly. We show exactly what Brandon and Patricia did and why it was unacceptable. We make it clear that Vail Industries won't tolerate that behavior anymore. That's a significant risk. So is doing nothing. Adrian met each board member's eyes. My father built this company on principle. I scaled it and lost sight of those principles. If I can't find them again, I don't deserve to lead. But if you give me the chance, I'll build something we can actually be proud of. Not just profitable, genuinely worth building. The silence stretched out, heavy with decision. Finally, Richard spoke. The board will need to vote. If we move forward with your proposal, you'll have 6 months to show measurable improvement in retention, employee satisfaction, and cultural metrics. If you can't demonstrate progress, we'll revisit leadership succession. That's fair. And you'll accept oversight. Monthly reports to the board. Full transparency on the culture audit. No more unilateral decisions. Agreed. Richard looked around the table. All in favor of supporting Mr. Vail's restructuring proposal? Hands rose. Slowly, reluctantly in some cases, but they rose. Jennifer first, then 3 others. Richard himself. Finally, even Thomas raised his hand, though he looked like it physically pained him. Motion carries, Richard said. 6 months, Adrian. Make them count. Adrian stood. Thank you. As he left the boardroom, he heard Thomas mutter to Richard, This is either the best decision we've made or the one that destroys us. Richard's response was quieter, but Adrian caught it. Ask me in 6 months. Outside, Sarah was waiting with obvious relief on her face. You're still CEO, she said. That's good? For now. I have 6 months to prove I'm not crazy. Are you crazy? Adrian thought about his father's memo. About Lena waiting in records management. About the choice between politics and principle. Probably, he admitted, but I'd rather be crazy and right than sane and complicit. He pulled out his phone and called Lena. It's done, he said when she answered. I have 6 months. Let's fix this company. There was a pause. Then, where do we start? With the truth, all of it. Every buried problem, every punished whistleblower, every political game that put the wrong people in power. We document everything, then we rebuild. That's going to make you a lot of enemies. I know. Adrian looked out at the city, at the empire he'd built without seeing what he was building. But I'd rather have enemies who hate me for doing the right thing than friends who enabled me to do the wrong one. Okay then, Lena said, and he could hear the smile in her voice. Let's build something worth fighting for. Adrian hung up and headed back to his office, where 6 months of impossible work waited. But for the first time in 2 years, he felt like he was moving towards something instead of just away from grief. And that, he thought, was worth whatever came next. The transformation didn't happen overnight, but it started with something small that felt enormous. On Monday morning, exactly 1 week after the board meeting, Adrian stood in the main lobby of Vail Industries at 7:45 a.m., greeting employees as they arrived for work. Not standing at a podium or behind a security detail, just standing there by the elevators, shaking hands and learning names. Good morning, Adrian Vail, What department are you in? Engineering? How long have you been with the company? Is there anything you wish leadership knew about your work? Most people look startled, some suspicious, a few genuinely pleased. But everyone noticed, and by 9 a.m., the entire company was buzzing with speculation about what the CEO was doing in the lobby, like some kind of corporate greeter. Lena arrived at 8:15, stopping short when she saw him. "You're actually doing this," she said. "You suggested it." Adrian shook hands with a nervous-looking intern, asked her name, told her to email him directly if she ever had concerns. Then he turned back to Lena. "You said I needed to be visible, to show people that leadership actually cares what happens below the executive floor." "I said a lot of things. I didn't think you'd actually listen to all of them." "That was your first mistake." Adrian smiled. "Come on, we have a meeting at 9. The meeting was in the large conference room on the 23rd floor. Neutral territory, not the executive boardroom that made people feel like they were being judged. Adrian had invited department heads, senior managers, and a random selection of employees from across the company. 50 people total, representing every level of Vail Industries. They filed in with expressions ranging from curious to wary. Adrian waited until everyone was seated, then stood at the front of the room without notes or slides. "Thank you for coming," he began. "I know this is unusual. I know some of you are wondering if you're in trouble or if this is some kind of elaborate performance review. It's neither. This is me admitting that I've been a terrible leader and asking for your help to become a better one." The room went very quiet. 3 weeks ago, an analyst in data analytics saved this company from a catastrophic failure. She worked through the night, solved a problem my executive team couldn't fix, and did it all with skill and dedication that should have been celebrated. Instead, she was punished, demoted, exiled to a department where she'd be invisible. He could see people shifting in their seats, exchanging glances. "Her name is Lena Hart. She's sitting right there." Adrian gestured to Lena, who looked like she wanted to disappear into her chair. And what happened to her is not an isolated incident. It's a pattern. A culture where doing excellent work can get you destroyed if it makes the wrong people look bad. Marcus Chen, sitting near the back, had gone pale. "I'm responsible for that culture. Not because I created it intentionally, but because I ignored it. I trusted my executive team to maintain the values this company was founded on, and I didn't notice when those values got replaced by politics and self-preservation." Adrian took a breath. "So here's what's going to change. Starting today, we're conducting a complete culture audit. Third-party firm, full access, complete transparency. Every employee will have the opportunity to report problems without fear of retaliation. And when the audit is complete, we're going to rebuild our systems from the ground up." He paused, scanning the faces in front of him. "But I can't do this alone. I need to know what's actually broken. I need to hear from people who've been too afraid to speak up. I need truth, even when it's uncomfortable. Especially when it's uncomfortable." Silence. Then a hand rose in the middle of the room, a young woman Adrian didn't recognize. "Yes?" She stood nervously. "I'm Rachel Chen, Product Development, and I have a question." "Go ahead." "Why should we believe you? We've all heard executives promise change before. It never happens. Or it happens for a few weeks and then everything goes back to normal. What makes this different?" Adrian appreciated the directness. "Honest answer? I don't know if it will be different. I can promise I'm serious. I can promise I'm willing to fire people who retaliate against employees for telling the truth. I can promise I'll show up every day and do the work, but I can't promise I won't fail. All I can promise is that I'll try, and that I'll be transparent when I do fail." Rachel sat down slowly, processing. Another hand, an older man near the front. "Yes?" "David Park. I've been with this company for 16 years. I watched it go from a place where people mattered to a place where keeping your head down mattered. You want to know what's broken? The managers who punish anyone who disagrees with them. The review process that rewards political skills over actual work. The fact that most people stopped caring about excellence years ago because excellence gets you noticed, and being noticed gets you targeted." His voice was shaking with suppressed anger. "You want to fix it? Stop protecting the people who broke it. Stop making excuses for executives who built empires on other people's ideas. Stop pretending that profit margins are more important than the humans who generate them." The room was utterly silent. Adrian nodded slowly. Thank you. That's exactly the kind of honesty I need. Can you send me specific examples, names, incidents, patterns? You'll actually read them. I'll read every single one, and I'll act on them. David sat down, still looking skeptical but slightly less hostile. More hands rose, more voices, a dam breaking. A woman from marketing talked about ideas being stolen by her supervisor and presented as his own. An engineer described being told to ignore safety concerns because fixing them would delay a product launch. A junior analyst explained how she'd reported financial irregularities and been transferred to a different department within a week. On and on. Story after story. Years of accumulated frustration pouring out because someone had finally asked to hear it. Lena watched Adrian's face as he listened, seeing the way each story landed like a physical blow. He didn't interrupt, didn't defend, didn't make excuses. He just listened and took notes and let people see that their truth mattered to someone with the power to change things. After 90 minutes, the stories finally slowed. Adrian stood again, looking exhausted but determined. I've heard you. Every word. And I want you to know that this isn't just a listening session. Every issue raised today will be investigated. Every person named will be held accountable if the evidence supports the claims. And starting immediately, Lena Hart is heading a new special projects division reporting directly to me. Her job is to find problems and fix them before they become crises. If you have concerns you don't feel safe raising through normal channels, you can bring them to her. He looked at Lena, who nodded, despite the weight of what he'd just put on her shoulders. One more thing, Adrian said. I'm instituting a new policy. Any manager found retaliating against an employee for raising legitimate concerns will be terminated. No warnings, no second chances. We're done protecting people who punish honesty. The meeting ended with a strange energy. Not quite hope, but something adjacent to it. Possibility, maybe. The sense that things might actually change, even if no one quite believed it yet. As people filed out, several stopped to shake Adrian's hand. A few stopped to talk to Lena, thanking her for being visible, for giving them someone to trust. David Park was one of the last to leave. He paused at the door. Mr. Vale, I'll send you those examples, all of them. But fair warning, you're not going to like what you find. I know, Adrian said. Send them anyway. When the room was finally empty except for Adrian and Lena, they both sat down heavily. That was intense, Lena said. That was overdue. Adrian rubbed his face. How many of those stories did you already know about? Most of them. You'd be surprised what people tell you when you're invisible. They assume you can't do anything about it, so they use you as a confession booth. And now you can do something about it. We can do something about it, Lena corrected. I'm not doing this alone. You're going to be right there with me, seeing every ugly truth, making every hard decision. I know. Adrian looked at his notes, pages of problems that would take months to address. This is going to get worse before it gets better, isn't it? Definitely. The managers who've been getting away with this won't go quietly. You'll face resistance, sabotage, probably more legal threats. People will quit rather than change. Others will fight to protect their power. Encouraging. Lena smiled slightly. But you knew that already. You wouldn't have started this if you weren't ready for the fight. I'm not sure I'm ready. I'm just sure it needs to happen. Then let's make it happen. Lena stood. I'll start organizing the reports. You should probably prepare for the PR nightmare when people realize you're serious about accountability. She was right. The nightmare came faster than expected. By Wednesday, word had spread about the meeting. Employees were submitting formal complaints through the new reporting system Lena had set up. The third-party audit firm had begun conducting interviews, and the managers who'd been named in multiple complaints were starting to panic. 3 department heads requested emergency meetings with Adrian, all making the same argument. The complaints were exaggerated, taken out of context, based on personality conflicts rather than actual misconduct. Adrian listened to each of them with the same question. Can you explain why multiple employees from different teams are telling nearly identical stories about your management style? None of them had good answers. By Friday, 2 had resigned rather than face investigation. The third, a VP of operations named Gregory Stone, who'd been with the company for 14 years, decided to fight back. He called a meeting with his entire department, 200 employees, and gave a speech that was equal parts defiant and manipulative. I want to address the rumors some of you may have heard, Gregory said, pacing in front of the assembled staff. about complaints being filed, investigations being launched, about changes coming to how this department operates. He paused for effect. I've been with Vail Industries for 14 years. I've built this department from 20 people to 200. I've delivered results every single quarter. And now, because a few disgruntled employees didn't like being held to high standards, my leadership is being questioned. Adrian heard about the meeting 20 minutes after it happened from 3 separate sources who'd been in the room and felt uncomfortable with Gregory's narrative. He called Gregory into his office immediately. Gregory arrived with the confidence of someone who believed he was untouchable. 14 years of success. Powerful allies on the board. A track record that looked impeccable if you didn't look too closely at how many talented people had left his department. You wanted to see me? Gregory sat down without being invited. I heard about your meeting, Adrian said. Just addressing concerns with my team, keeping them informed. You called the employees who filed complaints disgruntled and suggested they couldn't handle high standards. That's retaliation, Gregory. That's leadership, managing perceptions, making sure my team understands that we have standards in this department. Adrian pulled out a folder, one of many Evelyn had helped Lena compile. Your department has the highest turnover rate in the company, 37 people in 3 years. When interviewed, most of them cite management culture as their reason for leaving. Weak performers who couldn't handle the pressure. Top performers, actually. 3 of them are now senior leaders at competing firms. They took our institutional knowledge with them because working for you was unbearable. Gregory's confidence flickered. You're basing this on exit interviews? People always blame management when they fail. I'm basing this on patterns. Adrian opened the folder. Email from you to your team. Anyone who can't work weekends shouldn't work here. Another, I don't care about personal problems. Leave them at home or leave permanently. Another, the squeaky wheel gets replaced, not greased. He looked up. You've built a culture of fear. People don't raise concerns because they know you'll punish them. You've surrounded yourself with yes men and driven away anyone with the backbone to disagree with you. I've built a department that delivers results. You've built a department that's hemorrhaging talent and operating on fear. That's not leadership. That's tyranny. Gregory stood. I'm not going to sit here and be lectured by someone who's been CEO for 2 years. I built this department. I know what works. And I'm telling you it stops working today. Adrian remained seated, calm. You're suspended pending investigation. You'll have the opportunity to respond to the specific complaints against you. If the investigation supports termination, you'll be gone. If it doesn't, you'll return under strict conditions, including management coaching and regular reviews. You can't do this. I can. I am. Clean out your desk. HR will be in touch. Gregory's face flushed red. You're making a mistake. The board will hear about this. My attorney will hear about this. You're destroying this company to protect mediocrity. I'm protecting the people you've spent 14 years crushing. Adrian stood now, meeting Gregory's height. And Gregory, the door is behind you. Use it. Gregory left, slamming the door hard enough that Sarah jumped in the outer office. Adrian sat back down, hands shaking slightly from adrenaline. His phone buzzed. Lena. Heard what happened. You okay? Adrian texted back. How many more like him are there? 7 that I've identified so far. Maybe more. Let's find them all. The investigation into Gregory Stone took 2 weeks. The third-party auditors interviewed 43 current and former employees. The pattern was undeniable. Years of abusive management disguised as high standards, talented people driven away, complaints ignored by HR because Gregory delivered numbers. The auditors recommended immediate termination. Adrian fired him personally in a meeting that lasted less than 5 minutes. Gregory's attorney threatened a lawsuit. Adrian told him to proceed and gave the auditors permission to testify about their findings. The lawsuit never materialized. But the message was received throughout the company. The old rules didn't apply anymore. Over the next 3 months, 4 more managers were terminated. 2 resigned before investigation could be completed. 6 others were placed on probation with strict oversight. The culture audit expanded, touching every department, uncovering problems that had festered for years. It was brutal, exhausting work. Adrian spent 12-hour days reviewing reports, conducting meetings, making decisions that affected lives and careers. He barely saw Sophie except for bedtime, barely slept, barely had time to process the scope of what he'd uncovered. But slowly, painfully slowly, things began to change. Exit interviews started showing different patterns. People weren't leaving because of toxic management anymore. Employee satisfaction scores, which had been declining for years, started to tick upward. The anonymous reporting system Lena had implemented received hundreds of submissions, but increasingly they were about specific problems rather than systemic abuse. And most surprisingly, productivity increased. When people weren't spending energy navigating politics or protecting themselves from retaliation, they focused on actual work. Projects moved faster. Innovation returned. The Lena hearts of the company, brilliant people who'd learned to be invisible, started speaking up again. 4 months after the board meeting, Adrian stood in front of the entire company for the first all-hands meeting since the transformation began. The auditorium was packed, 12,000 employees watching in person or via video feed. The energy was different from any company meeting Adrian had attended. Not performative enthusiasm or forced engagement, but genuine attention. People wanted to hear what he had to say. Adrian took the stage without notes. 4 months ago, he began, I stood in a conference room with 50 of you and admitted that I'd failed as a leader, that I'd built a company where politics mattered more than excellence, where good people got punished for doing the right thing. He paused, scanning the crowd. I told you I wanted to change that. Many of you didn't believe me. Some of you still don't. And honestly, I don't blame you. You've heard promises before. He took a breath. But here's what's actually changed. We've terminated 7 managers for abusive behavior. We've restructured our review process to focus on actual performance instead of political skills. We've implemented anonymous reporting with real protections against retaliation. We've promoted 19 employees who'd been overlooked because they didn't play politics well enough. Adrian looked directly at the camera that was streaming to remote offices. And we've started having real conversations about what we value. Not what we say we value in mission statements and press releases, but what we actually reward and punish through our actions. He gestured to the side of the stage, where Lena stood with several other employees. I want you to meet some people. Lena Hart, who saved the Meridian deal and was punished for it. She now heads special projects and reports directly to me. David Park, who told me the truth about our broken systems when no one else would. He's now advising our culture transformation initiative. Rachel Chen, who asked me why she should believe I was serious about change. She's helping redesign our review process. Each person stepped forward briefly, acknowledging the applause. These aren't tokens, Adrian continued. They're leaders. They represent what Vail Industries should have been all along, a place where competence matters more than politics. Where speaking truth gets you promoted, not punished. Where excellence is celebrated instead of feared. He paused, letting that settle. But I'm not going to stand here and tell you we've fixed everything. We haven't. There are still problems, still managers who resist change, still systems that need rebuilding. This is going to take years, not months. Adrian's voice softened. What I can tell you is that we're committed, that every day we're working to build something worth being proud of. Not just profitable, actually worth the years of your lives you give to this place. He looked out at the sea of faces. I'm going to tell you a story. 4 months ago, a woman I barely knew sent me a message at midnight. She said she could fix a crisis that was about to destroy this company. I had every reason to ignore her. She was junior, invisible, someone I'd probably passed in hallways 100 times without noticing. But I didn't ignore her. I went down to the 4th floor and watched her work. And in those 5 hours, she reminded me of something I'd forgotten, that excellence doesn't care about hierarchy. That the people who can save you are often the ones you've spent years overlooking. Adrian's voice grew stronger. Lena Hart taught me to see people again, to value competence over credentials, to understand that building something great means finding brilliant people and getting out of their way. He gestured to Lena, who stepped forward. So I'm going to let Lena speak for herself, because the whole point of this transformation is that people like her shouldn't need permission from people like me to use their voice. Adrian stepped aside. Lena moved to the microphone, and for a moment she looked exactly like she had 4 months ago. Invisible, uncertain, someone the world had taught to be small. Then she took a breath and spoke. I didn't want this, she said quietly. The auditorium went silent to hear her. I didn't want to be visible. I didn't want attention. I just wanted to do good work and go home at night knowing I'd contributed something meaningful. Her voice grew steadier. But I learned that in some systems, doing good work makes you a threat. Being competent makes you dangerous. Speaking truth makes you a target. She looked out at the crowd. How many of you know what that feels like? Hundreds of hands rose, then more, then more. Lena nodded slowly. I see you. I've been you, and I want you to know it's not your fault. You're not too sensitive or too political or not tough enough. You're working in a system that was broken. She paused. Was. Past tense, because we're fixing it. Not perfectly. Not quickly. But we're fixing it. Lena's eyes found Adrian at the side of the stage. Adrian asked me what I wanted when he offered me my job back. I told him I didn't want recognition. I didn't want my old position. What I wanted was to know I wasn't wrong, that doing the right thing mattered, even when it cost me everything. Her voice caught slightly. And what I've learned over these 4 months is that I wasn't wrong. None of us were wrong. We were just in a place that punished us for being right. She looked back at the crowd. So if you're sitting there wondering if you should speak up about a problem, or report a concern, or push back against something you know is wrong, do it. Because we've built systems to protect you now. We've proven that retaliation has consequences. We've shown that excellence matters more than politics. Lena stepped back from the microphone, and the applause started. Not polite corporate applause, but genuine, sustained, the kind that comes from people who've been waiting years to hear someone say out loud what they'd only whispered in private. Adrian returned to the microphone as the applause faded. We're not done, he said. We won't be done for a long time. But I want you to know, this isn't just a corporate initiative that'll fade away. This is who we are now, who we're committed to being. He looked directly into the camera. Vail Industries was built on the principle that brilliant people can build extraordinary things if you give them the tools and get out of their way. We lost sight of that principle. We're finding it again. The meeting ended with something Adrian hadn't felt in years. Genuine connection. Not performance or theater, but actual human engagement. As people filed out, dozens stopped to talk to him, to thank him, to share their own stories, to tell him about problems they'd been afraid to mention before. And Adrian listened to every single one. That evening, he stood at his office window watching the sunset paint the city in gold and amber. Lena joined him, holding 2 cups of coffee. Long day, she said, handing him one. Good day, Adrian corrected. For the first time in months, I feel like we're building something instead of just fixing what's broken. We're doing both. That's the point. Lena leaned against the window. You know the board meeting is next week. 6 months. They'll want to see metrics. We have metrics. Retention up. Satisfaction up. Productivity up. Even profit margins are holding steady despite the disruption. Numbers won't convince the skeptics. No, but transformation will. Adrian smiled slightly. Richard called me yesterday. Said he's been getting emails from employees, hundreds of them, thanking the board for supporting the changes. That's good? That's unprecedented. Employees don't usually contact board members to say thank you. Lena was quiet for a moment. Do you think it's sustainable, or are we just in the honeymoon phase before everything reverts to normal? I think it's sustainable if we stay vigilant, if we keep listening, if we keep holding people accountable. Adrian turned to look at her. And if we keep remembering what we learned, that the people who can save you are often the ones you've been overlooking. Speaking of overlooking, Lena pulled out her phone, showing Adrian an email. Emily Rodriguez, the woman Evelyn showed you in the files from 2019, the one who identified critical flaws in a product launch and got demoted for it. What about her? She heard about the changes. She wants to come back. Adrian felt something warm settle in his chest. Offer her a senior position, whatever she wants. And Lena, find the others. All 15 of them. Let's bring them home. Lena nodded, smiling. Already started reaching out. They stood together at the window, watching the city transition from day to night, from chaos to possibility. Thank you, Adrian said quietly. For what? For sending that message at midnight. For trusting me when you had every reason not to. For teaching me how to see again. Lena's smile turned softer. You would have figured it out eventually. Maybe. But I'm glad I didn't have to figure it out alone. His phone buzzed. A message from Sophie's nanny. She wants to show you her dinosaur drawing before bed. Says it's important. Adrian checked his watch. 7:30 p.m. For the first time in months, he was actually going to make it home for bedtime. I have to go, he said. Dinosaur emergency. The most important kind. Lena picked up her bag. See you tomorrow? 8 a.m. We have that meeting with the department heads about the new review process. Wouldn't miss it. Adrian rode the elevator down to the parking garage, got in his car, and drove through the city to the brownstone where Sophie was waiting with a purple dinosaur that apparently needed to eat 3 people before dinner. He spent an hour on the floor with her, being eaten repeatedly, reading stories about pterodactyls and velociraptors, answering endless questions about whether dinosaurs had eyebrows and if they liked pizza. After she fell asleep, he sat in her doorway for a long moment, watching her breathe, thinking about the company he was building for her to inherit someday. Not an empire, not a machine. Something human. Something worth the years people would give to it. Something his father would have recognized. The next morning, Adrian was back in the lobby at 7:45, greeting employees, learning names, listening to problems. David Parks stopped on his way in. Still doing this, huh? Every day, Adrian said. It's the easiest way to remember what actually matters. And what's that? The people no one else has seen. David nodded, satisfied, and headed for the elevators. The board meeting the following week was different from the one 6 months earlier. Richard still sat at the head of the table, but his skepticism had been replaced by something closer to approval. The metrics are impressive, he said, reviewing the culture audit results. Retention up 14%. Employee satisfaction scores the highest they've been in 8 years. Even productivity gains despite the leadership disruption. More importantly, Jennifer added, we're getting unsolicited feedback from clients. They're noticing the difference in how our teams operate. More responsive, more innovative, more engaged. Thomas, predictably, was less effusive. The legal costs were substantial. Brandon's settlement, Patricia's, the audit firm, the restructuring. We spent over $3 million on this transformation. And we'll save 10 times that in retention and productivity, Adrian countered. Not to mention the talent we can now attract, because people know we actually value competence. The question is whether it's sustainable, Richard said. Can you maintain this level of engagement, or will it fade once the initial momentum wears off? It's sustainable if we institutionalize it, Adrian pulled out a document. We've drafted new policies, codified protections against retaliation, built accountability into every level of management, created systems that don't depend on my personal involvement. He slid copies across the table. This isn't about me being a better CEO, it's about building a better company, one that will still value excellence and integrity even after I'm gone. Richard read through the policies, nodding slowly. This is comprehensive. It needed to be. Band-aids don't fix systemic problems. No, Richard agreed. They don't. He looked around the table, reading his fellow board members. All in favor of adopting these policies and continuing to support Mr. Vale's transformation initiative? Every hand rose. Even Thomas's, though he still looked skeptical. Motion carries. Richard smiled. Genuinely smiled. Congratulations, Adrian. You've done something I didn't think was possible. You've actually changed the culture. We're not done. No, but you've proven it's possible. That's worth celebrating. The meeting ended with handshakes and genuine congratulations. As Adrian left the boardroom, Richard pulled him aside. Your father would be proud, he said quietly. He saw these problems but never figured out how to fix them. You did. I had help, a lot of it. The best leaders always do. Richard paused. I'm sorry I doubted you. I should have trusted that you'd find your way. You should have trusted that the people I overlooked would show me the way, Adrian corrected. That's the real lesson here. The answers were always in the organization. I just needed to start listening. He returned to his office where Lena was waiting with a stack of reports. How did it go? She asked. We won. Policies approved. Full board support. That's amazing. Then she saw his expression. Why don't you look happier? Because winning the board's approval was never the point. Building something worth leading was the point. And that work doesn't end. No, Lena agreed. It doesn't, which is why I brought these. She spread the reports across his desk. New concerns from employees, problems that needed addressing, situations that required attention. Ready to get back to work? She asked. Adrian looked at the reports, then at Lena, then out at the city where 12,000 people were building something together. Always, he said. And they did. Over the following months, the transformation deepened. More toxic managers left or changed. More talented people stepped into visibility. More problems got solved before they became crises. Emily Rodriguez came back and brought 2 other former employees with her. The department Gregory Stone had terrorized was rebuilt with new leadership that valued people over fear. The anonymous reporting system became less necessary as people felt safe raising concerns directly. Vail Industries didn't become perfect. No company ever does. But it became better, more human, more honest about its flaws and more committed to addressing them. And Adrian learned something his father had tried to teach him in that final memo. Power wasn't about control. It was about seeing the people no one else noticed and choosing, finally, to stand beside them. 1 year after that midnight crisis, Adrian stood in the east wing of the 4th floor, looking at the records management office that had been Lena's exile. It was empty now. Evelyn had retired 6 months earlier, content that she'd finally helped someone instead of just watching them be destroyed. The office had been converted into a conference room for the Special Projects Division, but Adrian had insisted they keep one thing, the desk where Lena had sat, organizing files, being invisible, waiting. It sat in the corner now with a small plaque, in memory of everyone who was overlooked. You were always worth seeing. Lena found him there, standing in the doorway. Feeling nostalgic, she asked. Feeling grateful. If I hadn't walked down here that night, if Evelyn hadn't shown me the truth, if you hadn't trusted me enough to help, none of this would have happened. Something would have happened eventually. Systems that broke and don't last forever. Maybe. But I'm glad it happened with you, with us. Lena smiled. So am I. They walked back to the elevator together, talking about the next challenge, the next problem, the next opportunity to build something better. Because that's what leadership actually meant, Adrian had finally learned. Not grand gestures or perfect decisions. Just showing up every day, seeing people clearly, and choosing to stand beside them in the quiet work of building something worth believing in. The elevator doors closed, carrying them back up toward the work that never ended but always mattered. And in the city below, in offices and cubicles and conference rooms across 12 floors, people who'd spent years being invisible felt seen. And that, in the end, was everything.